تحية عطرة من البيت الأبيض في هذا اللقاء الخاص والأخير الذي نجريه مع الرئيس الأمريكي جورج دبليو بوش. Mr. President, thank you very much for this exclusive interview, the last, and thank you very much for granting us to NBC and for me personally on behalf of the Arab media. I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. I've enjoyed working with you. You've been a very fair journalist, and it's been a pleasure to have known you.
Thank you, sir. You were the first American president to call for the establishment of a Palestinian state. You have hoped that you will have this state realized while you're in office. Do you think that you could have done more? Do you think that you have thrown all of the weight of the U.S. behind this vision?
Absolutely. We threw all the muscle and all the weight of the United States behind the vision. I wish there would have been a clearly defined state by the time I left office. However, I do take comfort in a couple of things. One, the attitude toward a Palestinian state has shifted. I think there's universal recognition in the region that in order for there to be peace, there must be two states living side by side in peace. Secondly, I am pleased that Prime Minister Olmert and President Abbas, after Annapolis, have worked very hard to narrow the differences on a variety of issues. And they have. They've made substantial progress. Thirdly, I am pleased that there is the Arab Peace Plan, which is an essential part of creating the conditions for a Palestinian state to evolve. Fourthly, I'm grateful that at the Annapolis conference, all Arab nations were represented, which is an important signal because I learned a lesson in studying previous efforts for peace, that there must be regional buy-in. In other words, the nations in the region must stand with the Palestinians in particular and say, we support you. And so, and fifthly, by the way, I am pleased with the progress being made to help the development of an infrastructure in the West Bank. Prime Minister Fayyad has asked for help. A lot of nations are helping, including the United States. We're helping with security measures. Generals Dayton and Jones have been very helpful. My friend Prime Minister Blair, former Prime Minister Blair, who was here the other night for dinner, and I talked about the economics that are beginning to take place in the region. In other words, a state can be defined on paper, but it also has to be defined in a civil society and a strong economy. And it's beginning to happen.
How do you see the Palestinian issue evolving in the next few years? I mean, Prime Minister Tony Blair said actually there's no peace without Gaza, and I guess that means Hamas as well. Do you share that vision?
I share the vision that the only way there's going to be peace is where those who assume that violence is necessary to achieve peace cannot be a part of the process. In other words, people have to renounce violence in order to have peace. It's contradictory to say, I am going to use violence to achieve my objectives, and oh, by the way, I'm for peace. And so, yeah, ultimately, Gaza's got to be, look, Gaza has to be a part of a Palestinian state, and the Palestinian state has to be contiguous territory. It cannot look like Swiss cheese. And it's got to be a state in which the sovereignty of the Palestinian people reigns supreme.
So you're confident it's going to emerge? I
am. I really am. There'll be fits and starts. I mean, if this were a straight line between vision and reality, it would have happened. But there's a lot of complicating factors. Obviously, the terrorists create complicating factors. Secondly, politics creates complicating factors, and both within the Palestinians as well as the Israelis, as we have seen. And but nevertheless, the foundation is there. People, if you give people a choice, ultimately give them a choice between two states side by side in peace, or this unresolved dispute, what would they choose? They would choose peace. And this will happen.
What will President-elect Obama pick up from where you left?
Well, I think we left it in good shape. We've left it with the vision intact. In other words, a lot of people now share the vision of two states. As I say, there's been progress between the Israeli Prime Minister and the Palestinian President toward what a state should look like. I think the Israelis are beginning to be more comfortable with the notion that a state won't create less security for them, but more security for them. And the Arab world, because of the Arab Initiative as well as the Annapolis Conference are showing more and more willingness to be constructive partners in getting peace.
The U.S. and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have a close strategic relationship. You personally have a very good working relationship with King Abdullah. Yet you don't see eye to eye on many issues. How did you resolve these things?
Oh, I think we do. I think we agree more than we disagree. First of all, I hold His Majesty in high respect. I appreciate, for example, the religious dialogue that he instigated, and I was honored to be invited to go to New York. I thought that was a very smart way to help promote understanding, and understanding eventually leads to peace. He is a man who understands that terrorists can destroy his own society, and so I don't know if the world understands this or not, but Saudi Arabia has been very firm in dealing with Al-Qaeda. Mm-hmm. And remember, it was Al-Qaeda that tried to blow up their oil infrastructure. They killed their citizens, and His Majesty knows full well that that kind of terrorism cannot coexist, with a peaceful society. When I have my discussions with him, I find there's a lot more common ground than not.
So there's no disagreement with the Palestinian issue with Iran, for example?
Oh, I think His Majesty understands. Look, the Arab Peace Initiative actually talks about, Israel solving its problems with Lebanon and Syria and the Palestinians, and there will be universal recognition when that happens. And so, to me, that is a very positive statement, and that the idea of a Palestinian state as far as being part of the solution to the overall problems is something I believe he agrees with. I don't want to put words in his mouth because he's my dear friend.
In the recent years, there was an emergence of Qatar as a regional player in many of the conflicts in the Middle East. Do you see that played on the kind of the expense of traditional allies of the U.S. like Saudi Arabia and Egypt?
I think it's going to be very important for the initiatives instigated by Qatar to show results. For example, with Hamas. Now, Hamas, in my judgment, the violent wing of Hamas damages the prospects for a Palestinian state. Or with Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. I believe that Hezbollah is a very destabilizing influence, particularly when they resort to violence. And so what I would look for, and do look for, and would hope the next president would look for, is, okay, are these initiatives bearing fruit? We, of course, appreciate our basing agreement with Qatar, and we thank them very much for that. And we would hope that they would follow through to deliver the results for peace, which is what we all want, I hope.
We're going to move to Iraq. Recently, the U.S. and the Iraqi government have signed the Status of Forces Agreement. What do you think of it?
I think that the Strategic Framework Agreement and the Status of Forces Agreement is a sign that the Iraqi democracy is emerging and is healthy. There was a lot of debate on the SFA and SOFA. And there were people that a lot of people saying, well, this would be bad for Iraq, and others saying this would be good for Iraq. And after the debate was over, it was ratified by the People's Assembly, and I think that's a healthy sign. I also think it's very good to have an agreement in place that recognizes the sovereignty of Iraq and recognizes that the United States will be moving its forces out of cities and then eventually out of the country based upon success.